Are you strategic? The answer can make or break your business. Welcome to Strategic Minds, the podcast where we'll do a deep dive into conversations with extraordinary leaders and world-class performers to learn how they think, plan, and act strategically. I'm your host, Rich Horwath, author of 8 books on strategic thinking, including my newest book, Strategic. And my vision is to teach the world to be strategic. Now, let's explore Strategic Minds.
We're stuck.
What do we do? I have no idea.
You need a new strategy.
We need a more dynamic strategy.
The strategy?
You have to strategize.
But you won't strategize.
Let's talk a little strategy.
Welcome to Strategic Minds. I'm excited to chat with my guest today, Dr. Mark Guadagnoli. Dr. Guadagnoli is a neuroscientist and performance coach recognized for integrating science, strategy, and human behavior to optimize performance under pressure. He serves as Senior Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs and Director of Learning and Performance at the Kirk Kerkorian School of Medicine at the University of Nevada at Las Vegas, where he also oversees the Leadership Academy. Mark is the creator of the Challenge Point Framework, a model for improving learning speed and retention under stress, now cited in over 3,500 scholarly papers and applied globally across fields such as medicine, AI, sports, and corporate leadership. His 2 books, Human Learning, Biology, Brain, and Neuroscience, and Practice to Learn, Play to Win, explore how the brain builds high performance through purposeful practice. In addition to his academic leadership, he heads up Triad Consulting, where he has advised elite athletes, medical professionals, and executives at organizations including Zappos and Grammarly. Mark, thank you for being on the show today.
Rich, thank you for inviting me. I'm already excited about it.
All right, let's do it. So, Mark, love to begin with your origin story. Please share with us a little bit about where you grew up and how that environment and the people there shaped who you are today.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting story, question rather. So I guess the short version is I'm the 7th of 8 kids. Grew up in a very ethnically diverse area of South Dallas, and very high energy kid, very, looking at life in possibilities. Sometime I think overwhelming for my parents. Plus they had another 7 running around, like me. And, but you know what? I will tell you that combination of things allowed me to start looking at life and complex systems in a way that saw patterns in what was happening. And I think, I learned that. I'm still learning that. And, but that's really one of the great drivers in life. I love being able to see patterns in complex systems.
Yeah, that's amazing because systems do drive a lot of what we see from the physical perspective, from the mental perspective. So definitely want to dive into some of that systems thinking as we move forward today. I'd be interested, Mark, as you grew up then and you started to think about what am I going to do with the rest of my life, what were some of the early events that shaped your career path and determining the fact that you wanted to devote yourself to enhancing human performance?
Yeah, well, we'll step back for a second because I've only recently started thinking, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? I've been very fortunate to stumble along a path that's been very, very grateful. I've been very grateful for. I started out, Rich, as an athlete. We were talking about your daughter just before we got on here, and athletics was really the driver for me for a long, long time. I was probably a junior in college before I was even the least bit interested in academics.
Okay.
In fact, I went to college to continue to play sports. But there were some things that shifted me about that time. And one of the many, many fortunate things in life is there was somebody that was there when I expressed interest, Charlie Shea, who became a mentor and still is a mentor, many, many years past, who said, hey, if you want to do this academic thing, let's do it. And that really, those kinds of very fortunate situations have happened along the way, and I'm just incredibly grateful for that. But it wasn't a master plan. It was looking at things that were very interesting to me you asked earlier about the origin story. When I was a kid, I was a very active, full speed kid. And I think what's happened, continued to happen, I may appear a little bit more calm, but I'm still an active, full speed kid, right? and so when I see an opportunity, I really can't help myself but to go for that opportunity. And I've had mentors and good friends and so forth to support me along that journey.
It's funny, Mark, as you talk about that, it's really interesting to me, the juxtaposition of you talk about that full speed, personality, and yet you wound up, in neuroscience and in human performance, which one thinks about as slower, more reflective. How do you process that juxtaposition of being that full speed person with the reflection that it takes to be in the field that you're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great question. I'll tell you, I'm going to think out loud here instead of, because I don't know the answer really, but the thing that jumps out at me is my full speed is no longer pointed outward, it's pointed inward. And so when I have something like an academic problem, a how can I help situation, so forth, I turn the full speed lens internally and really start thinking about it, almost like in an incubator, but a very intense incubator. But I think that it doesn't look like that on the outside. I think it more looks like I'm almost in more of a meditative state than this sort of frantic internal, kind of turning the wheels as fast as I can turn them state.
It's still kind of like the duck on the top of the water, the feet underneath and really going, but you're not seeing those. What human performance is something that's really come to the forefront, especially in athletics. I know the last few years when athletes either perform at a high level or they don't perform at a high level, we're seeing that from a corporate perspective. We're seeing a lot more focus on leaders' ability to mentally process what's happening. We've seen, in the last few years, more executives have been let go for issues around emotional intelligence than business performance, which has been unusual. So there really is a high degree of focus in the area of human performance today. From your perspective, Mark, are you seeing anything from? And I know, as we talked about in your introduction, you've had the good fortune of working across different disciplines, sports and business and so forth. Do you see any challenges commonly across performers in sports, in business, in other areas, whether it's the military and so forth? And what would those challenges be?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great question as well, because the answer is absolutely yes. I see commonalities across industries, and there's several different ways to look at this. So, as an example, good performers across industries are usually stubborn or tenacious is probably a kinder word, but they sort of have their mind set on something. Great performers are also stubborn, tenacious, but they're also open enough to seek out ways to be better. And so as a result of that, they tend to be self-reflective and have a sense of self that's very different. Those same individuals tend to be purpose-driven rather than outcome-driven. And I think that goes across what's happening. Now, I will say that the purpose-driven versus outcome-driven is a little bit of a slippery slope, and here's why. So, one of the groups that I work with are medical professionals, trauma surgeons, emergency medicine, and so forth. People literally die if they don't do their job, right? And so it's not time to just think philosophically when you have a scalpel in your hand. And so they absolutely want the outcome that they want. But in the training to get that outcome, it's not about ego. It's not about what it looks like, because it's going to get messy. It's about the actual doing whatever you need to do to get the outcome that you need to get. So the purpose behind the training, like working with trauma surgeons and Navy SEALs and people like this, in a way, it kind of makes a 4-foot putt not as big a deal,
Right.
And yet, all of them want success, and the ones who consistently have success are the ones who can buy into the process, buy into the purpose. I just had a conversation with a friend of mine. This was last week. He took a company from startup to unicorn, right? A multi-billion-dollar company, and he was as good at sticking to the values and the purpose as anybody I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. That includes athletes and so forth, right? And so that's one of the most consistent things that you see when people play the game for the long run, but then in the moment, they're in the moment, right?
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I want to go back to what you said just a moment ago, that the combination of tenacity and openness to be better. And one of the things that, right now we've got the Major League Baseball playoffs. And one thing that drives me insane all the time is when you hear managers who make a bad decision during the game say afterwards, well, I wouldn't do anything differently in the future. And so I love that idea. And I think for the leaders out there listening to this, it's really important to think about that tenacity, because a lot of folks that are leading do have that tenacity, but do you have that openness, that reflection time to think about, how can I get better? And are you looking for other perspectives to help you get better? So I love that idea. And Mark, one of the things that I really admire about your work is not only it's steeped in academics and in theory, but you give us a lot of great tools to work with. And one of the tools that I've seen is this challenge point framework. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about the challenge point framework, what that is, and how people can utilize that to be more effective.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking this. Challenge point framework to me is something that Tim Lee and I published an academic paper on it 20 years ago now. And I am very happy to say that it has taken on a life of its own, well beyond Tim and me. And so you mentioned some of this in the intro, but the essence of the challenge point framework is that if you practice a particular way, and that way is at your edge, which I'm happy to elaborate on, but if you practice at your edge, there are a few predictable things that are going to happen. Number one, you're going to fail more often than most people do in their practice. And practice, by the way, can be practicing cello or golf or a speech or biology in an academic class. It doesn't matter what it is. But if you practice a particular way at your edge, you're going to fail more often than most people, but you're also going to learn 3 or 4 times faster, and it's going to be stress resistant, which means that it shows up under stress. I was just talking to a golfer yesterday who was telling me, I practice for hours every day, and I can just stripe it on the tee, on the practice tee, but then it doesn't translate to the course, right? Well, that doesn't really do you much good,
right?
And so this type of practice, this challenge point practice, translates to the place where you really need it. And so, but then there's a magic to it that's really interesting, and that is because you are at the edge, you are at this dance between success and failure every single attempt that you have. And as a result of that, you stop fearing failure. You understand that as part of the process. And so, I think about this a lot. Think about what life is like if you're not worried about whether or not you're going to be successful. And so this method actually does that. And so you become more of who you are without the I don't know if I can say this, the shit hanging on you, right?
Right.
But you become more of who you are without having that clutter around you, because you no longer have fear there. And it's not like you are fearless, because that's a natural response, but you don't fear fear. You're not afraid of it. You're like, yeah, I'm nervous. Cool. This is great. Let's go. Right? And that's a very different feeling than, oh my God, I hope I don't miss a putt, or I hope I don't screw up this presentation at the board meeting. Right? you get excited about those opportunities. And so anyway, as you mentioned, it's been, I just read a paper recently that reviewed 3,500 articles with Challenge Point involved in it. Again, way beyond what Tim and I did, which is super cool to me. And it's in industries like medicine and AI technology and robotics and rehab and obviously education and motor skills and all these different areas where people have applied this work. It's unbelievably gratifying that people have taken something that Tim and I created and used it for good. And this is one of these examples where I stumbled across something that is bigger than I could have ever imagined, right? And the thing that's interesting about it is there's over 100 years of data research that got me thinking about this idea of challenge point. Complex system, right? And looking for patterns within a complex system and identifying it and describing it and then letting people run with it. And man, that's been cool to get to see that happen.
I want to take a quick moment to thank everyone who's been sharing the Strategic Minds podcast. Your support is what helps us grow and reach more leaders who want to think and act strategically. If you've been finding value in these conversations, I'd love for you to follow in their footsteps. Share the podcast with a few friends or colleagues in your network who you think would benefit from becoming more strategic in their work. Your word of mouth makes all the difference, and I truly appreciate it. Well, it's great, and kudos to you for getting that level of traction. And you don't build that level of traction across different disciplines without it being simple, yet comprehensive and effective. So to me, those are the things that create that level of traction, which is really fun to see. A couple questions, a lot of great stuff you shared there. I want to unpack just a couple of them. The first one is the idea of practicing at your edge. I think that's an exciting concept for people. Is there something, Mark, when you're working with people to help them understand where is my edge exactly? You talked about, kind of that, and you described it beautifully. I think it was that dance between, success and failure. How do people determine what is my edge? Because my guess is a lot of people aren't pushing themselves near enough to the edge to realize what you're talking about.
So in the framework, the challenge point framework, there's what's called the optimal challenge point. And that's essentially your edge, right? And one of the things that's really interesting about that is the optimal challenge point is not more is better. It's the optimal is optimal, right? And so what you find is that when you are pushing yourself to a certain level and to give some, concrete ideas with this, roughly if you've got about a 35 or 40% failure rate, depending on what you can tolerate, that's going to be the optimal level. And this isn't theoretical, by the way. Again, there are many, many studies that have looked at this. And what ends up happening is when you are at that level, you're chancing failure, but you're also chancing great success, and your body and brain responds to this. And so, there's dopamine that's released as a reward center. There's acetylcholine, which is sort of like adrenaline for the brain that says, hey, let's pay attention here, right? Because we're at this edge. We could potentially fail, so let's really pay attention. A whole host of things. Your anterior cingulate cortex lights up because it's looking for potential errors or potential successes. Your brain lights up about this stuff, right? It feels different to be working at your edge. And again, the easy way to say this is if you're pushing it hard enough, so your success rate is like maybe 65, max 70%, then you're probably there. So I'll give you a specific example. I have the good fortune to work with a lot of elite performers in athletics, including golf. You're going to tell a golfer you're going to fail 30 or 40% of the time. That doesn't sit well. But failure is different for different people. If you have a golfer and they're trying to hit a green that's out there that's maybe 160 yards away, most of these golfers can hit that green probably 10 out of 10 times on a driving range, right?
Yep.
And so the target is no longer the green. The target is the left side of the green.
Yes.
Right? And so now all of a sudden what you've done is they may still hit the green 10 out of 10 times, but they hit the left side 6 or 7 out of 10 times.
Gotcha.
And so that's where you're elevating. So it's not failure like it's a complete loss. It's failure like you haven't hit this very precise target. Now, you take somebody who's not that good of a golfer, and this is why, by the way, it's your edge, not the edge. Take somebody who's not as good a golfer. And I remember actually when I was learning to play golf, if I could get 7 out of 10 balls, 6 out of 10 balls off the ground, that was a success. Like literally that was a success, right?
Sure.
So our edge is ours. We own that. And it's not, mine isn't yours, yours isn't mine. And so what is success for me, my optimal challenge point is different from somebody else's. This is why, by the way, this challenge point framework works for everybody. I mean, it's been used for elite athletes, people who have Parkinson's disease, older adults, younger adults, children. It doesn't matter because that optimal challenge point scales to the individual. And it creates this whole biological cascade that's going on with neurochemicals and brain centers lighting up and so forth. And I know that Tim and I were the ones who kind of created this idea. I get excited about this all the time because I'm constantly learning new things about it. Like I didn't know about the biology, the neurobiology of this. I was, a friend of mine invited me to do a lecture at Harvard several years ago. And one of the audience members, a postdoc in biochemical physiology, said, "Hey, do you know the biochemical physiology behind this?" And I'm like, "No, I don't." Right. And so she turned me on to a couple of papers, and I'm like, "Holy crap, this is exactly what we're talking about." But now down to a cellular level. And then, reading this, each individual cell in the brain responds the same way as our entire being. Like that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. So let's take this then into the business world, because one of the things that we see is we see people want to be successful, as you talked about. We want to see innovation oftentimes in companies, but sometimes the culture isn't set up that way. What would you suggest to help business leaders, get people to play at their edge, so that they feel comfortable in doing so, and not, well, if I make a mistake, then I'm not going to get that next promotion, or I'm not going to get that next raise. What's been your experience in the business world in trying to get leaders to build a culture that supports what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, this is, it's interesting. It's a loaded question, right? Because there's so many pieces to this, but it's a really interesting question. So one of the things, and we're going to expand beyond this because there's sort of the micro aspect of this and the macro aspect, right? The micro is the individual and the macro is the organization. In the micro aspect, it is that the person feels safe working at their edge. Not safe like it's, they're going to win. Safe like it's okay if I don't, as long as I learn something from that. And that's a big, as long as.
Yes.
It's not just that, go ahead and take chances, and if you fail, you fail. No, you have to learn something or you've wasted that opportunity. So one of the things that I think is really helpful here is a feedback method. We refer to this as the elite performer feedback method within the School of Medicine. Again, the people that we're working with, it's life or death, oftentimes if they succeed or not. And it's a very, very simple concept with a huge and fantastic science behind it. It's called Good, Better, How. And I got it from golf, right? Working with golfers. So you start off and you say, what was good about that process? This is going to go back, by the way, to what you said about the managers in baseball and why, I don't want to be judgmental, but I don't agree with what they're saying. And I'll tell you why in just a second. But what was good about that performance, right? What was good about how you prepared. What was good, Rich, about the podcast that we did, right? So we can talk about these things, and that level sets around good. And that's not to pat yourself on the back, because that's to say, this is a behavior or whatever we did was positive. Let's do that again, right? Because we know what's rewarded tends to be repeated.
Yes.
And so that's part of the reason for good. And now we're going to elevate beyond that. What could be better and how do we make it better? So we go to the manager, right, that says, I wouldn't have done anything different. Then I say that's a wasted opportunity, right? Okay, what was good is my thought process based on the information I knew. I made this decision and I made it timely. That's all good. What could be better is I could make a better decision. I could see around the corners and look at the shadows, the things that I missed in making that decision. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to ask a simple question. What else could I do? What else could it be? Right? Something like this. This, by the way, in medicine is a huge deal because physicians tend to immediately come up with a diagnosis and then do everything they can to support their diagnosis instead of ask the question, what else could it be? And that, can become a really significant problem. Anyway, the idea behind that is nothing is failure per se. Everything is an opportunity for learning. So you go back to these golf examples, I missed the green to the left, or I missed the left side of the green. Well, what was good about it? My process was really good. I had very solid contact. I finished the swing well. What could be better? I noticed that I wasn't really locked in. I mean, I had sort of a general target that I wanted to hit the green, but I didn't really have a specific target exactly where I wanted to go. So next time, before I step up to the ball, I'm going to have a specific target. Okay, so there's nothing soft about this. Good, better, how sounds kind of soft. There's nothing soft about this. And we've done research about it and so forth, and it's very well received by people, and it's incredible for improving performance as well. So then to get to your question, back to your question, if I know that no matter what happens in this situation, right, this business situation, that I've tried something, the first thing I'm going to do is say what was good about that opportunity. I stop being afraid of not performing well because I know that no matter what happens, one of two things is going to happen. Number one, I'm successful. Number two, I learned something. One of those two. Right? And that changes the game. Now, if it's the same thing over and over again, same mistake over and over again, there's something wrong.
Right.
But that wasn't one of the two options. Number one, I was successful. Number two, I learned something. Those are the two options, right? If one of those things isn't true, then there's a problem in the system. So when you create that level of it's going to be okay because I'm going to either be successful or learn, then it changes the dynamics of that individual and therefore the individuals within a culture.
I love that part of it, and this idea of success or learn. And it's not success or failure, it's success or learn. And one of the things I've seen across my work with executives is that the better executives these days are really creating accountability for insights, or the way I define an insight is a learning that leads to new value, which I think fits perfectly with what you just described, this idea that it's either success or it's a learning. And are we documenting those learnings? And then that's, I think, to your one way to approach what you just talked about in not making the same mistake over and over again. If we start to document the learnings, that's going to give us the behaviors, hopefully in the future, that would change that trajectory.
Yeah, I think that that's true. And I'll give you an example that you already know is if, I've looked at, watched several of your podcasts, and I think you started out really good. I think you've gotten better and better through the podcast. And I don't know what process you go through, but I bet it's something similar to a good, better, how, where you're saying, okay, Brandon, what can we do better? Your producer, what can we do better about this? And hey, if we tweak this or we do that, is going to come off better, right? That's where you're not sort of degrading yourself because it wasn't just the way you wanted it in hindsight. You're using it as a growth opportunity, and it shows.
Well, thank you. I mean, and I think that's a great way for us to move forward and think about, especially when we get to these, and I want to get your thoughts on these high pressure moments. So if I'm a leader, I've got a presentation, let's say to the board of directors, or I'm pitching to a venture capitalist to get a big funding round. Those are really high stakes moments. What's your thought, Mark, in helping a business leader prepare for those events that are really important to their career long term? We've got the success or learn. That's a great one. Any other tips for these higher pressure moments?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I would say is you don't prepare for high pressure moments with low pressure preparation.
Yeah, makes sense.
And so, but you can go overboard, right? This challenge point, one of the things about challenge point is you are in the optimal pressure situation. And so not only does it affect you from a neurobiological perspective in the moment so that you learn much, much faster, but it gets you ready for high pressure situations. Like what it feels like. And you learn things like how to control your breath and how to focus on the things that you should focus and self-talk, all these things. Like, this isn't an independent system. Again, we're talking about a complex system that has certain patterns in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then what happens is you get to the point where it's how cool is this? I'm in the game, Sorry, I got distracted for a second because I started thinking about this. When you do a doctoral dissertation, there's a point where you do what are called comprehensive exams, comps. And it's about 8 hours of exams, just you. You're the only person in the room. You do, and your committee can ask any question they want. And some have an attitude that they're trying to fail you. I was so excited for my comps when I got to them, right? I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Not in an arrogant way, right? Because easily I could have failed. But this is what I've been training for, And so when you go to that boardroom, if you train properly, you walk in going, this is so cool. This is the game, right? This is what I've trained for, and I've trained in a way that I'm going to be successful. Either it's going to go exactly the way I want, or I'm completely capable of adapting.
Mm-hmm.
And either way it goes, it's going to be a win for me. And that's a great feeling, when you get to walk in an environment to feel that. And the thing is that you may not hit it perfect, but you're going to do a lot better. And again, you either win or you learn.
Yeah, that's that should be the title of the book, Win or Learn. I love that. Let's talk a little bit about, I'd love to get your thoughts on confidence. So there's different perspectives on, do you bring confidence into an experience or an arena with you, or does the confidence come after you've had the experience within that arena? Where do you see, Mark, in your work, confidence coming in, and how do you counsel leaders, physicians, and so forth around confidence?
I don't. And the reason I don't is because confidence is a lagging indicator of performance for most people.
Okay.
What I do help people with is commitment.
Okay.
So I think that if you are truly committed to what you're doing, you crowd out everything else. And so there's no need for confidence because there's no area of lack of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
When we were talking about your daughter, who's an elite level volleyball player, when she's going to spike a ball, if she's thinking in the middle of that spike, she's done.
Right.
Right. But if she's 100% committed to what's going to happen, there's a pretty good likelihood that it's going to turn out well because of the training that she's had up to that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so commitment to me is way more important than confidence.
Excellent. Thank you. That's very helpful, I think, for a lot of us out there. And again, one of the things I'd suggest for leaders listening to this is, what is your commitment level right now? Especially for those of us who've been doing our jobs like myself for 20, 25 years, do we still have that same level of commitment? And how do we refresh on that commitment? So I challenge everybody listening today to really think about, what is your level of commitment, and is it where it needs to be to move forward? Any thoughts you have, Mark, on getting people maybe that have been in business for a long time, or a physician that's been in practice for 20, 25 years, on commitment, on ways to reignite or refresh that commitment?
Yeah, I think, Rich, so I feel compelled to say this about this, what we were just talking about, commitment. Commitment does not come from a place of arrogance. Mm-hmm. And because if it does, you're likely to miss something.
Yep.
Right? I actually think commitment and humility are fantastic partners, right? You are completely committed. If it doesn't work out, or if you miss something, you're like, oh, wow, okay, I can see what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Or now I understand that, right? You can't do that if you don't come from a place of humility.
Yes.
And so I think that those are two really important partners in this. And so, but by the way, I want to also, if you don't mind, just step back for a second, because you had asked a question, and the macro of having people, having an organization, have a culture where they can prosper, where they don't fear mistakes, where, these kinds of things. That's a really, again, complex system, because cultures are living entities. Mm-hmm. Every organization has a culture, whether they instituted it or not. And if you don't institute a culture, you tend to have a regression, where you're racing to the bottom, right? Yeah. And so intentionally creating a culture, a value-based culture, and reinforcing that over and over again becomes really important, because there is no neutral as far as culture is concerned. It's either moving you in the right direction or the wrong direction based on what your goals are. And so, and it also doesn't come from a bunch of plaques on a wall, right? Right. It is a dynamic living system that has to be executed from everybody within the organization.
Yeah, that's a huge take home, just to interject real quick, that idea of culture being active, not passive. So again, I challenge folks out there listening, what are you doing to activate your culture in the direction that you want it to go? So that's great stuff there.
So this gets back to the question you asked, because I think this is actually in The Power of Habits, Atomic Habits, which is a great book. So I'm going to paraphrase this. Every action you have is a vote in one direction or the other. Mm. It's either a vote in the direction of your goal, or it's a vote not in the direction of your goal. Mm. And I say not in the direction because it's not necessarily opposite, but it's definitely not in the direction. So why would you waste a vote?
Right.
Right. So a really simple example, you set your alarm. Hey, I'm going to wake up at 5:30. I'm going to read for 30 minutes, et cetera, et cetera. 5:30 rolls around and you're like, do I want to get out of bed or not?
Right.
Well, number one, you're about to make a vote, either in the direction of your goal or not in the direction of your goal. And number two, you're asking the wrong question. Of course you don't want to get out of bed. It's warm and comfy.
Right.
The question that you should ask is, which do I want more? Do I want to lay here for another 15 minutes and worry about getting out of bed? Or do I want to get out of bed and live the life that I want? Mm. Right? That's a different question than do I want to lay in a comfy bed?
Right.
So, and we have those questions all the time. And if we string a whole series of votes together in the direction that we want to go, and I'm not talking about 100%, 70%, 80%, man, you're knocking it out of the park.
Yeah. Well, and as business leaders too out there listening, the importance of framing the question, I think Mark brings up is a huge one. And Mark, you talked about goals, and the goal taking us in the right direction, the wrong direction. One of the interesting things you shared with me is the potential use of your challenge point framework and principles when it comes to strategic planning. I know a lot of executives that listen to the show do strategy, do planning on a regular basis. I'd be appreciative if you share with us a little bit about your thoughts on how they might start to use those principles and framework when it comes to planning.
Yeah, and I realize that you're the master of strategic planning, so jump in, correct me along the way here. But I've had the good fortune to be the director of strategic planning for the School of Medicine from before the school actually started, which is really interesting. Like, here's the strategic plan for what we're going to be doing as a School of Medicine, and with lots of different organizations, corporations, sports teams, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think is a common mistake is that people overreach in their strategic plan. And remember, the optimal challenge point says that there is a point at which you are challenging yourself optimally so that you're tempting failure, but you're not overdoing it, right? So I'll give you a couple of examples of this. The idea is to work at your edge, which means that you are working at a place where you're tempting failure, but not so far that your whole system shuts down, right? And not so little that there's no challenge. So I was teaching goal setting in class one time, some years ago, and there's a pretty big guy in the back of class, and I asked him I asked the whole class, how many of you achieve your goals more than 50% of the time? And, a spattering of people raised their hand, and then, 60, 70, 80, 90. And this guy raised his hand not more than 90% of the time. My first thought is, then you're setting your goals too low. But I asked him because maybe I didn't know something, right?
Sure.
So I said, well, give me an example of a goal that you have. And he says, I'd like to be able to bench press 325 pounds. I'm like, whoa, that's a good goal. Okay, so we're going to work on this through the semester. How much do you bench press now? And he goes, 325 pounds. I'm like, wait a second. I thought you said that's your goal. And he goes, it is. So he set goals that he had already achieved.
Oh, okay.
And that's why he achieved 100% of his goals, right? Gotcha. That to me is where I don't really see the value in that. Maybe he knows something I don't, but I don't see the value in that.
Right.
So, but to also say, for somebody else who's got a bench press of 60 pounds, who says, I want to bench press 325 also, that's a goal too far reaching. And what ends up in that situation is the system craps out. It says, we can't do it, so let's just quit. It doesn't say let's slow down. It says let's just quit, right? And so something in between there, what I would consider an optimal challenge point for an organization. So I'm at the Kerkorian School of Medicine in Las Vegas. Nevada is really poorly ranked in healthcare. We're 49th in the country for access to physicians. What this means is that we have, it's not that we have bad physicians, it's we just don't have enough relative to our population. In fact, we have so few relative to our population that we're 49th in the country, right? That's not good. Well, initially, when our build-out team for the med school was writing the vision of the med school, it was, we want to be a world-class school of medicine. I mean, it's a longer mission, right? And that sounds great, but we're 49th out of 50.
Right.
So how about we set a vision that is aspirational and inspirational. And that's one that's more at our optimal challenge point. And that is within 5 years, we want to improve healthcare in the state of Nevada.
Yeah.
Okay. And now we've got something to go for. And how do we do that? Well, we improve access. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. We recruit more physicians. We grow our own physicians through the medical school and the residency program and on and on and on, right? And at 5 years, we revisit our strategic plan and we're like, whoa, look at this. Look at what we've created, right? But if we say we want to be a world-class medical center, people are going to go, we're not going to do that.
Right.
You know, we don't even have a foundation at this point.
Yep.
And so, and I know that it doesn't sound very romantic to have this lesser goal, what it seems like, but that's the way you get better, right? Then you're completely committed to that goal. Hey, we only have 5 years to improve healthcare in the state of Nevada. This is a moonshot. This is a big goal. Let's do it. And then we get to that, and now we set the next goal and so forth. This idea of an optimal challenge point, we can use it in so many different places in our lives because one of the things that I think a lot of times people don't realize is if we overreach or underreach, we are overstimulating or understimulating. And by the nature of those statements, we are not optimally stimulating. We're not optimally motivating. We're not optimally aspirational, so forth and so on, right?
That is great guidance because a strategy is only as good as the goal that it's set to achieve. So if we have goals that, to your point, are too far out in the future, they're not unrealistic, or goals that, like you said, I'm benching 325, I'm at 325, then the strategies inherently are going to start from the wrong foot. So I think, again, for the leaders out there, great guidance that Mark shared there is really focus on that optimal point from a goal-setting perspective. That's going to set you up to be much more successful in developing strategy that's going to really gain some traction. Mark, you talked earlier about, you referenced in our conversation, the elite performer cycle. And I'd love for you just to get in a little bit more detail there because I think you've got those 3 phases that athletes use, but physicians use, business people I think can adopt that as well. Share with us a little bit about what that cycle is.
Yeah, I would say whether people know it or not, if they're elite, they use this cycle. Whether they know the language or not. The elite performer cycle, it's got 3 aspects to it. Train, compete, recover. And there's 2 kind of interesting things about this. One, what each of those things mean, because I think the definitions are important. And 2, the ratio in which people do those things, right? So training is anything you're doing to improve yourself. This could be mental training, physical training, some combination of both of those. In sports, a lot of times, and even in presentations, we talk about this performance formula that says ability minus interference equals your performance. So if you have the ability, obviously I'm using a lot of golf analogies, but if you have the ability to go shoot a 72, but you shoot a 82, going to the range is probably not the thing to do. Thinking about why you allowed interference to affect you so much, right? Because it wasn't an inability, it was a over too much interference that affected you, right? So the challenge point practice method, by the way, works on ability and interference at the same time, which I think is one of the things that makes it positive. But anyway, the point is anything that you're doing that is improving you mentally, physically, spiritually, however you want to do, like your spirit, etc. That is training. And typically it's towards your craft. So your craft could be as a leader, your craft could be as a surgeon, your craft could be a lot of different things, right? But training towards improving yourself that's going to impact your craft. Competition is where you have an elevated state, elevated central nervous system, elevated arousal state. There's higher focus. There's more energy outlay. These kinds of things, right? You think about going into the game or going into the board meeting or these kind, that type of example. And then recovery is not just not doing something. Recovery could be active, like cold plunges and saunas and massage and these kinds of things, or it could be passive, which is, it's not exactly passive, but meditation and going for walks and these kinds of things that are more on the passive side of the spectrum. Okay, so those are the basic definitions. So I'm going to ask you to guess about this. Disregarding our conversation the other day. So just what would you guess? How much time does a normal person, a business person, for example, spend on training? What percentage of time a week?
I would say it's probably fairly low. I'll say 10%.
Okay, so let's say 10%. How about competition?
I would say 90%.
Okay. And so I think I know what you're saying, but explain why you think 90%.
I just, a lot of the executives I work with, the leaders I work with, they're spread too thin. They've got lots of things going on. They feel like they're never done. So they're constantly on that activity treadmill. And so I feel like a lot of the work is getting people to step back and stop and just think and reflect. And so the recover, I'm putting it around 0.
Yeah. So that's interesting because I think that you're pretty close to those numbers. I would say competition is maybe 80%. Yep. Training is maybe 5%. Recovery is maybe 5%. Okay. Something like that. But then you look at elite level performers. And this, by the way, is across industry, elite level performers. Mm-hmm. Their training is going to be over 20%.
Yep.
Their competition is only going to be 1 or 2%.
Okay.
And that leaves almost 80% for recovery.
Wow.
And so if you're not optimizing for your recovery, that's a major lever that you're not pulling.
Yep.
Right. And so, and I think it's a little bit of a misnomer to say that that's what we expect people to do. What we expect, the optimal thing is to be in your optimal challenge point. Like for somebody like me who's primarily in academia, maybe I'm going to have more training than most, right? Because my training, I can use that to help other people.
Right.
And then competition might be where I'm sometimes physically in competition, but it also may be a presentation or something like that I really want to nail, right? Mm-hmm. And it still is going to be in that 1 or 2%. Maybe my recovery is a little bit less, but in that case, recovery and training kind of go together. Like journaling for me, is that recovery or is that training, right? Because it's insight, but it's also me kind of winding down my central nervous system.
Interesting.
And so I'm not saying that you have to have these ratios, but what I am saying, most of us can move our ratios closer to elite than we have right now. And most of us don't even think about the ratios.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, again, that's a good thing to do is to let's document, let's baseline where we are today. So I'm a big believer, once a quarter, take a week, document your time in 30-minute blocks and do what Mark is talking about. Think about that process of train, compete, recover, and start to use that as the lens on which you're viewing what you're doing day in and day out, and then let's adjust those percentages as Mark is talking about. So I think that's a very applicable tool for all of us out here. So great stuff there. Mark, I'd be appreciative if we could close our conversation with your response to 6 questions I refer to as the strategic 6, so our listeners can get to know you on a little bit more personal level as we finish up today. Number 1, what was your first job?
I was a paper boy. my dad had my two brothers and I delivering papers. He called us the mountain goats of South Oak Cliff. And I was maybe 6 years old. And I was the youngest of my brothers. We had, we were required by my dad to put the paper on the front porch. We couldn't throw it. And I loved it because I would run from house to house to house, jump walls, do all kinds of stuff to do that. And my brothers were not as happy about it as I was. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great, I love the mountain goat description. That's fantastic. Number 2, what's your favorite vacation spot?
I'll tell you just the one that came to mind was Italy. I love Italy. I love Florence. But I also love beaches and stuff. I would say that just to go with my first instinct, Florence, Firenze, Italy.
Yep.
But mostly with people that I care about. So wherever that is.
Great point. Great point. Number 3, what's the one word that best describes you?
I think probably possibility. There's a lot of my life that I look at in possibility. What could we do here? How can we get better? How can this help me? How can I use this challenge? I think I look at life in possibility a lot.
Yep, it's powerful. Number 4, what's one book that's had a significant impact on your development?
Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's not my favorite book. So a lot of people know this book, but it's about a man who survived concentration camps in Nazi Germany. In this case, he was in Auschwitz. Mm-hmm. One of the most famous lines, my favorite probably, is that between a stimulus and response is your ability to choose. And I think that's so powerful. The other word, by the way, that I was going to say was agency. That we have agency in our life. And that's, I think, something that if Viktor Frankl in Auschwitz had agency, so do the rest of us. Yeah. Another book that I really love is called The Alchemist. And it talks about this journey. And one of the things I love about the book is the central character is searching for his purpose. He keeps believing he's found it, and he keeps being shifted off that path because he didn't find it. That there was something that was smarter than him to move him in the direction he needed to go.
Yep.
And I really feel that way a lot of times, and I feel incredibly grateful for that.
Excellent. Number 5, what's the one piece of advice that you'd most like to share with others that would fit on a bumper sticker?
2 parts. Be brave. Don't be stupid.
Do you want to expound on that a little or no?
I think a lot of the things that we do in life, if we're a little bit braver, we just break through barriers like crazy, and then we look back and we're like, that wasn't that hard. Mm-hmm. But you, just like anything else, you can take it too far, right? Don't be stupid about it.
Yep.
But if it's something where it makes you uncomfortable because you think you could get embarrassed or you could be wrong or those kinds of things, just be brave. But if it's something where you think, I could die from doing this, maybe not. Don't be stupid.
That's great advice. And this is probably going to be a challenging one for you based on the many great experiences you've had. Number 6, our final one. What's the most exhilarating moment you've experienced in your professional life?
Because I could think of personal life, professional life. You know what? Personal life, by the way, running with the bulls in Pamplona.
Wow.
Also, I violated the don't be stupid part of my advice. But that was super fun.
That's amazing.
So I mentioned that I had taught at Harvard for a while. The day that I walked into the Harvard faculty club, flashed my ID so I could get in, and sat up at the bar and had a beer. I felt like that was it. You know, that was so cool. And strictly from academia, that was it. But I will tell you, Rich, much, much more important than that is when I see or hear from students that I've had that something that I said or did or some experience they had with me changed their lives in a positive way. And I'm eternally grateful when these things happen, and I'm dumbfounded that people take the time to reach out and let me know that. Dumbfounded in a very positive way.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I really appreciate that you shared with us a lot of great experiences today, but also some frameworks, some tools that are going to make all of us a little bit better at what we do. So I really want to say thanks so much for being my guest on the show today and for sharing your expertise, your experience, and your wisdom with us.
Yeah, thank you, Rich, for having me, and I hope that this helps people.
Absolutely will.
Any insights?
You play to win the game.
Any further insights?
You don't play to just play it.
Insightful.
I want winners.
I played the game to win.
I want people that want to win.
It's very insightful.
To close today's show, our Winsight, or idea for advantage, comes from Tom Gentile, CEO of Spirit Aerosystems, who said, "Think about your time very strategically because it is part of your strategy. You can't let it be a reactive process that bubbles up from the bottom. You have to manage it from the top down." Tom Gentile brings up an important point. How often is the calendar running us instead of us running the calendar? We've got to be in charge of our most important resource, which is time. We've got to consider ways to batch activities so that we're not having a lot of mental transitions and that we're focused, when we're focused, on the right things in the right ways so that we're generating new ideas and new value on a regular basis. We can't do that if we're acting like the bumper car, bouncing from one thing to the next. So as you approach your next week, think about, are you managing your time or is your time managing you? Thank you for listening to today's episode of Strategic Minds. I hope this conversation gave you some valuable insights that you can apply to your business and put into action. If you found this episode helpful, we'd greatly appreciate it if you'd leave a short review, maybe even a 5-star review on your podcast player. And thank you to everyone who's been sharing the podcast. Your support really helps us grow and make the world a little bit more strategic. If someone in your network could benefit from this conversation, please feel free to share it with them. If your team is ready to strengthen its strategic thinking and planning skills and get beyond the day-to-day tactical grind, visit strategyskills.com. There you can explore our workshops, online courses, strategic coaching, free Strategic Thinker newsletter, and my latest book, Strategic. You can also take your leadership development to the next level with the Strategic Fitness System, our state-of-the-art executive development platform. Until next time, remember, be strategic to be your best.